tenant rights in Nigeria. Rent payment, quick notices. Landlord and tenant rights in Nigeria. Rent payment, quick notices, eviction, and legal protections. Hello everyone, welcome to Law and Advocacy with a History. Today I will talk you through a very important topic, landlord and tenant rights in Nigeria, the special focus on eviction, statutory notices, and procedural protections. Whether you are a tenant, a landlord, or just interested in property law, this video will give you a clear understanding of your rights and obligations. I will examine real-life scenarios, legal principles, and judicial precedents, as well as those relevant in Delta states and some other states in Nigeria, to help you avoid mistakes and understand the legal protections of labor. Part 1. Understanding the tenant-landlord relationship. A tenant is a person who pays rent or holds a tenancy agreement. The tenant enjoys the right to quiet possession, meaning the landlord cannot interfere with occupancy without following the law. Even without a written tenancy agreement, payment and acceptance of rent establish a legal tenancy. For example, if you pay rent in your name, especially through a bank account supplied to you by the landlord, even if the landlord refuses to issue his own receipt and his tenant agreement, as most dubious landlords do, the law recognizes you as a lawful tenant. This is a fundamental tenant protection in Nigeria, and you should take note of it. Statutory requirements for eviction. Step-by-step procedure. Notice to quit. A notice to quit must be served on the lawful tenant, that is, the tenant who paid the rent in their own name and from their personal bank accounts. Notice of owner's intention to recover possession. 1. 7-day notice of owner's intention to recover possession. This is only after the first notice expires. Filing an action in court. The case should name the tenant and anyone occupying under them, that is the visitor or licensee, not the visitor or licensee alone. Court judgment can only be enforced by bailiffs or court officials, not the landlord personally. Important point to note: serving notice on a visitor instead of the tenant is legally defective and should be avoided. Nigerian courts require the real tenant to be involved in all eviction proceedings. Common legal issues in eviction cases. Scenario analysis. Imagine a tenant who paid rent up to June 2026, but the landlord issued a quick notice to a visitor terminating the tenancy in February 2026. Issues. There are 3 main issues involved here. 1. Premature termination. Rent was already paid. The tenancy legally continues until June 2026. 2. Wrong party served. The visitor is not the tenant. Notices should have been served on the tenant. 3. Procedural defects. Eviction cases may fail if the proper tenant is not a party to the lawsuit. Practical takeaway: a landlord cannot bypass a tenant and sue someone else, even if that person is living on the premises. Courts will look at who actually paid the rent and not someone who occupies the property with the permission of the lawful tenant. Strategic legal arguments for tenants. Lawyers often rely on these strong arguments. 1. Defective notice. Notices were not served on the lawful tenant. Statutory notices are mandatory under Nigerian law. Wrong party sued. Tenant as a necessary party. The tenant is a necessary party. Excluding the tenant is a procedural defect that may invalidate the case. Violation of the tenant's right to fair hearing. Constitutional right to defend legal interest if it's ignored if the tenant is excluded. Supporting evidence for tenants. This includes rent receipts and bank transfers. B. Witness confirming payment if payment was made by cash. 3. Registered letters requesting tenancy documentation. Key judicial references. See the case of Iheanacho versus Iuzochukwu, which requires strict compliance with statutory eviction procedures. And African Petroleum Limited versus Owoduni, accepting rent confirms tenancy even without written agreement. Holding over and paid rent principles. The holding over principle. When a tenant remains in possession after rent is paid or tenancy had expired, the law may treat them as having a new periodic tenancy. Acceptance of rent confirms the tenancy and protects the tenant from premature eviction. Example in practice. Tenant paid until June 2026. Quit notice issued for February 2026. Result, tenancy still subsisting until June 2026, making eviction premature and legally challengeable. Post-judgment remedies for tenants. Even if the landlord obtains a judgment, application to set aside judgment, grant wrong party sued, defective notice, or procedural irregularities. Stay of execution temporarily halts eviction while the legal challenge is considered. Important tips. Courts consider proof of tenancy through rent payments and whether statutory procedures were followed. This often favors tenants in disputes where landlords attempt to bypass the proper process. Key lessons for landlords and tenants. For tenants, always pay rent with receipts or proof, especially bank transfers. Ensure all statutory correspondence are documented. Challenge eviction if notices are defective or served on the wrong person. For landlords, serve notices only on the lawful tenant. Follow the recovery of premises law strictly. Accept rent responsibly and document tenancy to avoid disputes. In conclusion, eviction in Nigeria is highly regulated and tenants' rights are strongly protected. Landlords who ignore statutory procedures, serve notices on the wrong person, or terminate tenancy prematurely risk having their eviction claims invalidated by the courts. Understanding the law helps both tenants and landlords avoid costly legal disputes. before I draw the curtains, have you ever faced an eviction notice? Or do you know someone who has? Share your experience and we'll discuss it in the legal options available. Unless I can assist further, this is where I draw the curtain. Thank you.